to be able to come to learn with each of you. There is nothing else I'd rather be doing on the day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed me to come into this world and to learn Torah with each of you. And Emir Hashem, it should just be an incredible year of growth, of aliyah, of hatzlacha, of Talmud Torah, of siyumim, of finishing things, of beginning things, and of just incredible avodas Hashem together. Thank you to everybody who sponsored the breakfast this morning, the Ehrenfeld family, the Ziffer family, the Elman family, the Lerner family, the Kelman family, Erez family, Marowitz family, Lichtman family, Elman family, Nissel family, Shapiro family, Grossman family, Kozlovsky family, Abramson family, Buck family. There might be others. This is the list that Saeed gave me, but thank you very much to everyone who's sponsored, and thank you to everyone who's part of the Shir, Baruch Hashem. And of course, where is Saeed? I don't see him here. Oh, and a very special thank you to Saeed. Saeed is always where there is food, there is Saeed. And Baruch Hashem, and always with such revach and such shefa and such beauty and such professionalism. Saeed, thank you very much. And a personal thank you. This is very sweet, I still can't get over the decor. Mamish, thank you. A great zchus to be part of such a shir, a great zchus to have so many wonderful chaverim, and in Meretz Hashem we should just be zocha to celebrate many of our simchas, our individual simchas, our family simchas, our communal simchas, in Meretz Hashem for many years to come. Amen. And Abose, with that, let's begin. We're also, as I mentioned in the WhatsApp message, I think what we'll do is we'll make the siyum on Meseches Midos at the end of the shir. So we'll make that siyum Meretz Hashem today. We'll chaparain on this Seuda, that will be our Seudas Mitzvah for the Siyam as well. But with that, let's begin. Today's daf is daf Daled in Meseches Niddah. We have an incredible Gemara ahead of us. So we left off on Gimel Amud Beis 3b. We actually have a lot to do today. We left off 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17 lines up from the bottom, right after the parentheses. Itmar. Kupa shenishtamshu bataras bezavizu, v'nimtza sheretz bezaviz acheres. Well, so remember again, we already made reference to this case yesterday. I'm using a particular kupa. Kupa means a box. I'm using a kupa. The kupa itself was used for taras, was used for ritually pure items, whatever, for the preparation of trumas, maisras, and then what happens? So I used one part of the box for taras, and then I end up finding a sheretz in another part of the box. So remember again, the case over here is the taras have already been removed. So there's no longer any taras inside of the box. After I've removed the taras, now I find a sheretz inside of the box. So what I said, the obvious shayla is what's the impact of finding the sheretz on the taras that were once there but are no longer here? So Chizkiah says taras harishonos toros. Chizkiah says the taras are tar. In other words, there's no problem over here. The fact that I found the sheretz afterwards in no way impacts the taras that were there. Rabbi Yochanan says taras harishonos tmeos. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Halacha l'maisa. The presence of the sheretz now indicates us that the sheretz was there beforehand as well, and therefore the taras that were there are going to be tmeos. V'hosh shamai v'hillel modu b'kupa de taras harishonos tmeos. But one second, boss, we had in yesterday's daf that both Shammai and Hillel, or remember again, even Shammai, who normally holds what? Even Shammai normally holds Dayan Shaitan, that we look at things for what they are right now. Even Shammai agrees in the case of the kupa that halacha l'maisa, any taras that were done inside of that kupa will be tamei. The presence of the sheretz now indicates to us that it was there before, and therefore halacha l'maisa the taras should be tamei. To which the Gemara says, Ki modu Shammai v'Hillel. When do Shammai and Hillel both agree that there's a retroactive tumah to all the taras that were handled inside of that kupa? The kupa sheyesh la shulayim. That's a kupa ultimately again that has a bottom. Ki pligi Chizkiah v'Rabbi Yochanan b'kupa she'in la shulayim. When do Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan disagree? Rabbi Osai literally translated in a kupa, in a box that does not have a bottom. In a box that does not have a bottom. So Chizkiah will say in a box that doesn't have a bottom, any taras that were done inside of the box ultimately again will be tar, because we assume the sheretz just came in now. And Rabbi Yochanan will say no, any taras done inside of the box will be tamei. To which the Gemara says, 1 second, Ein lo shulayim. If the box doesn't have a bottom, my time of Rabbi Yochanan, then what would be Rabbi Yochanan's logic for saying that taharos that were done inside of that box would be tameh? I will say, ultimately, again, if the box doesn't have a bottom, then that would be an incredible raya that what? That when did the sheretz appear? Right now. Because again, if it was here before, then what? It would have fallen out without a bottom. To which the Gemara says, Ein l'shulayim v'yesh lo gnayim. The case is where the box doesn't have a bottom, but it does have what's the right word is, a rim or a lip, which is supposed to say, if you can imagine like this, you essentially have a receptacle that doesn't have a bottom, so when you place it down, it's no bottom, but the edges are curved up. So therefore, again, if you're using the kupa on its side, then ultimately, again, the lip would hold something back. So the shaila over here is if it has a lip, it has an edge. So do we assume that the sheretz was there the entire time, or the sheretz just came on the scene? That's the machlokes Chizkiya and Rabbi Yochanan. Aiva Tanya, but we learned, this is an interesting case. Hamad lasar dal yimai bezeh achazeh. Well, so let's watch this case. Someone's drawing water from a well. I'm using the same bucket. So I draw 10 bucketfuls of water, one after the other. V'nimtza sheretz be'echameh. And then one of the times I'm drawing water, I find sheretz in the bucket. So we'll say, so what's the aviyah shayla? Do I assume that sheretz has been there the entire time, and therefore all of the buckets that I have drawn have been tameh? Or do I assume that the sheretz literally just came on the scene when I discovered it right now? So what's the halacha? Hu tameh v'chulan tahorin. So what I said, the Brisa rules, that's what? The bucket in which you drew the water, now that you found the sheretz, that bucket of water is tameh, but all the previous buckets of water are absolutely tar. So that's only true if the bucket doesn't have a lip. But if the bucket has a lip, then what? Kulan tamein. Then all the buckets that you drew, all the buckets of water, will all be tamei. Why is there, Abu Say? Because if it has a lip, then we assume that what? The sheretz was there the entire time. Why didn't it come out when you spilled out the previous buckets? Because the lip of the bucket kept it in. Leima Chizkiya lesei Rabbi. So we'll say, it must be that Chizkiya. Remember, so Abu Say, let's go back for just a moment. Chizkiya we just said before that Allah Lamaisa, if you find the sheretz in a kupa that you were using taharos in, the taharos are gone, now you find the sheretz. So we established that case as dealing with a kupa that doesn't have a bottom, but has a lip on the side. And yet Chizkiya says that we assume that the sheretz was not in there at the time that the taharos were there, and the sheretz is discovered now. Apparently Chizkiya does not hold a Rabbi Yanai, to which the Gemara says no. Maya sharki, Pera lo sharki. Both say there's a fundamental difference. Water flows, fruits do not flow. Both say what that means is like this. To get water out of a bucket, you don't have to turn the bucket mamish fundamentally upside down. To get fruit out of a bucket, because water flows easily. So therefore, again, it's possible that if you have a bucket with a lip, right, you could be able to get the water out without turning the bucket all the way over. Because of that, it's quite possible that what? That the sheretz was inside of there the entire time. Masha'inkin with fruit, in order to get every last fruit outside of the bucket, what's going to have to happen? You're really going to have to turn it over. If the sheretz indeed was there, it would have come out as well. Inami, maya lo kapid alayhu, peri kebidalai. But so the other possibility is that halacha lamaisa, when it comes to water, so ultimately, again, people are not so makbid to get every last drop. When it comes to fruit, people are makbid to get every last fruit, and therefore halacha l'maisa will turn over the receptacle sufficiently to get the fruit out. V'baisema. Or furthermore, when do Shammai and Hillel agree that if you find a sheretz inside of a receptacle that was used for taharos, that we assume that the sheretz was there when the taharos were there as well? She'ena beduka, when you're dealing with a receptacle that was not inspected prior to use. I say in that case again, if you look at the last Rashi in the daf, bekuba she'ena beduka, shelabatka b'shashinasan taharos l'socha. No one checked the receptacle before putting taharos inside there. Hilchach ein la'amida al cheskas tara. So say again, if the kupa is not beduka, right? If the kupa wasn't sufficiently checked beforehand, you can't rely on the fact that the sheretz wasn't there before. In fact, you would assume that the sheretz was there before. Top of Dalid, ki pligi Chizkiya Rabbi Yochanan. When do Chizkiya and Rabbi Yochanan disagree? bikupa beduka. We'll say Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan disagree in a case, ultimately again, where you inspected the kupa prior to placing the taras inside. Mar savar habatka. So we'll say one opinion will say, listen, you checked the kupa. If you checked the kupa and it was sheretz free, then what? Then we assume that the sheretz came into the kupa at some later time. Specifically when? After the taras were removed. Umar savar Amar imsilak yado nafal. The other opinion says, no, even if you inspected the kupa, it's possible that what? When did the sheretz come in? Right when you finished inspecting it, which would still place the sheretz there, ultimately, again, at the time that the taras are there. So both say, again, in general, these machloksim are fascinating because really what they get to, we spoke about this a little bit before on Friday, on Erev Shabbos with the machlokes in the Mishnah about dealing with the nature of change, of human change. But the truth is, in general, that's what these machloksim are. Not necessarily in human change, but here you have a perfect example. I have a kupa that I checked. I have taras. I want to put my taras in a receptacle. I obviously want to make sure the receptacle is pure, is ritually clean. So I look inside. There's no sheretz. I put the taras in. At some later point in time, I remove the taras, and sometime afterwards I find the sheretz inside. So I'll say, so the shaila is, when do I assume that sheretz got in there? So one opinion will say, listen, you checked that kupa, which means that kupa was sheretz free. Therefore, when do we assume the sheretz came in there? Sometime after the taras were taken out. The other opinion says, listen, after you checked it, there's no telling what happened. So it's just as probable or possible that ultimately the sheretz came in the moment you stopped checking it, the moment you finished checking it. In which case, the sheretz was there mamish at the same time of the taras. V'had dumya di isha katani. But one second, but ultimately again, the Bryce has said that this is comparable. Ultimately, again, to the case of the Isha bedukahi, and we'll say this is actually interesting, and that the Gemara assumes that a Isha is beduka. What does that mean? Look at Rashi. The Isha bedukahi mikol dem lachein deha kol shachris ve'arvis hi bodekes. So we'll say, so an Isha is considered to be in a situation of beduka. We're going to see what this means in just a little bit. We assume, I will say, that she is inspected, so to speak. That halacha l'maisa, she inspects herself, right? She checks herself, and she is free from any dam. So the Gemara says, "V'kevan d'shchichi badamim kisheina beduka damya." We'll say, since it is common for a woman to bleed, therefore halacha l'maisa, she is considered to be like ena beduka. The other possibility is, ki modesh Shammai v'Hillel. When do Shammai and Hillel agree in the case of the kupa? The kupa she'ena mechusa. In a kupa that is not covered. In a kupa that's not covered, I'll say that's when Shammai and Hillel will both agree that any taras that you dealt with in that kupa ultimately again will be tameh. Because since it's uncovered, you have no idea when the sheretz could have come in there. Ki pligi Chizkiah Rabbi Yochanan. When do Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan disagree? Bekupa mechusa. They disagree in a case of a covered kupa. To which the Gemara says, mechusa heichi nafal. I don't understand. If the kupa is indeed covered, then what? Then I will say, how did the sheretz get in there to begin with? Kegon shetashmisha al yidei kisui. Both say what it means is that halacha l'maisa is the type of kupa that is used together with a cover, but sometimes it's covered, sometimes it's uncovered. Look at Rashi. Shetashmisha de kisui kishirotza lahachnis lesocha ulahotzim nisocha megale umechasa osa. So we'll say, so obviously the kupa itself is uncovered when you have to put something into it. So sometimes it's covered, sometimes it's not covered. So halacha l'maisa, so the shaila is, do we assume that something may have occurred with the kupa at the time when it's uncovered? So what happens? The Gemara says, so that's the machlokes. So the Gemara says, so what's the machlokes? Chizkiah would say, since it's primarily kept covered when in non-use, we assume the sheretz was not there at the same time as the taras. The sheretz came afterwards. Rabbi Yochanan will say that what? Since it's common when you want to get the taras to cover it and uncover it, therefore halacha l'maisa what? Therefore halacha l'maisa, We assume that the sheretz was there at the same time as the taras. But the Gemara said, the Bryce said this is comparable to the case of a isha. The isha mechusehi, and Abba said the isha case is an equivalent one of mechusa. Kevan the shchichi ba'adamim keshein mechusa damya. To which the Gemara says, since halacha lamaisa, it is common for a woman to bleed. Therefore, halacha lamaisa, she is the equivalent of a case of eina mechusa. It's interesting. V'bai sema, but say that possibility is ki modu shamai vehilel bizavis kupa. But now remember, just to understand what we're trying to accomplish over here. In yesterday's daf, the Gemara said that both Hillel and Shammai agree that in a case where you have a kupa, a box, and you were keeping taras in the box, at some time after you remove the taras, you find the sheretz inside of the box. So the Gemara said both Hillel and Shammai agree that the taras are tamei. Taras are tamei. Why? Why? Because we assume that the sheretz was there at the same time the taras were present. Now, in today's Gemara, we have another brisa. That brisa records a machlokes between Chizki and Rabbi Yochanan. Same case. I had taras that I was keeping in a box. I removed the taras. Afterwards, I find a sheretz. So we have Chizkiya telling me that the taras are tahar, Rabbi Yochanan telling me that the taras are tamei. We're trying to figure out the distinction between the cases. So we keep on giving different answers to how the cases are distinguishable one from the other. So another possibility, kupa. So we'll say, when do Hillel and Shammai agree? That's in a case, ultimately, again, of where you're using one corner of the kupa for taras. Ki pligi Chizkiya Rabbi Yochanan. You'll see what this means in just a moment. When do Chizkiya and Rabbi Yochanan disagree? Bezavis bias. They disagree ultimately again in what? Where halacha lamaisa, you're moving the receptacle to different corners of the home. We'll see what this means in just a moment. So look at Rashi actually for just a moment. Bezavis bayis kinefarish azol shetilta lekupa bezavis acheres laachar shenitlu taras imeno. So both say, so ultimately again, Shammai and Hillel are agreeing in what case where ultimately you used one side of the kupa, one corner of the kupa for taras, and then you discover a sheretz in another side of the kupa. That's when they will agree that ultimately all the taros are tamei. Where is the machlokes Chizkiya and Rabbi Yochanan? Where ultimately, again, you were using the kupa for taros in one corner of the house, and then you moved the kupa to another corner, and it's in that second corner where you discover the sheretz. Now, why that makes a difference, we'll see in just a moment. I have a whole kupa kamar, but one second, but that's not what the brisa says. The brisa doesn't seem to make any indication that you're changing locations in the home. Everything is about the kupa. Hachi kamar, this is what it means to say. Here we go. Kupa shnishtam shuba taros bezavis bayis zu. So we'll say, if ultimately again, you had a kupa and you had taros inside of the kupa, and you were using that kupa in a particular corner of the house. V'tiltaluha bezavis acheres. You then move the kupa to another corner of the home. V'nimtza sheretz bezavis acheres. And I will say, now you find the sheretz in the kupa, but in a different corner of the house. So I will say, what's happened over here is you found the sheretz in the same kupa that was used for taros, but what? The location of the kupa has changed. When I had the taros in the kupa, it was in corner A of the home. I now moved the kupa to corner B of the home, bless you, and it's there that I find the sheretz. So we'll say, what does that matter? Watch this. Chizkiya savar, this is actually incredible. Chizkiya savar, lo mechaskinon tuma mimakom lemakom. Chizkiya says, wherever there is a change of location, we do not assume that tuma changes locations. But Rabbi Yochanan savar mechaskinon. Both say this is incredibly dramatic. See, here's what I know. Just follow this case for just a moment. I had a kupa. Everything starts with a kupa. What happened? So we'll say, I'll speak loud. What happened? So we'll say, I had taras in the kupa. Now remember again, everything starts off in corner A of the home. When everything was in corner A, what was inside the kupa? What was in the kupa? Taras. Anything else? As far as I know, no. what happens then? I take the kupa then to corner B. Now, both say now what I did ultimately is I take the kupa to corner B. I take out the taurus, or at some point in time I take out the taurus. In corner B, what do I discover? A sheretz. So both say, what's my shaila? Was the sheretz inside the kupa in corner A when the taurus were in there? If the sheretz was there, then the taurus are tamei. If the sheretz was not there, then the taurus are tar. Herein lies the machlokes. So ultimately, again, Chizkiya savar lo mechaskinon tuma mimakom lamakom. So also listen to this. Chizkiya says this is fascinating. Chizkiya says we do not assume that tuma travels. In other words, if you find tuma in corner B, we assume that where did that tuma come from? B. Where was it not? A. Good, excellent. A, good, excellent. We'll say so again. That's Chizkiya shita. Therefore, Chizkiya says, great. As long as the taurus were out of that kupa before it got to corner B, we are good to go. On the flip side, Rabbi Yochanan savar mechaskinan. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, we assume tuma absolutely travels. So if you find that sheretz in the kupa, even though you change locations, the taurus was in corner A, you remove the taurus. Now the kupa is in corner B, taurus are no longer there. We assume that same sheretz was also in corner A. So we'll say this. By the way, you're going to see. This sounds like, okay, interesting, but who cares? You're going to see why this is a dramatic machlokes. So we'll say the notion of whether or not, essentially what we're asking is like this. When you find tuma, do you assume that the place where you found the tuma is also the point of origin of the tuma? Or do we say there's a possibility that where you find the tuma is not necessarily the point of origin. Maybe the tuma ultimately traveled to where it is now. And we're going to see a whole bunch of nafkaminas. It's incredible. Umima chaskinon. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, is that true? Do we assume that tuma travels? Rabbi say, listen to this case. Naga be'echad balayla. If you touched someone at night, ve'inu yodea im chai im meis. It's a little bit of a freaky case, but I bet you understand. They'll say, I touched someone at night, and then what happens? I don't know if they're dead or if they're alive. So we'll say, so again, ulamachar hishkim, the next morning you wake up, and what happens? Umatza meis. We'll say, the next morning you wake up, and the person is nebach dead. So we'll say, now what's the shaila? Here's what do I know? What do I know? Now they're dead. Right? What don't I know? Right? When they died. So we'll say, so the shaila is, last night when it turns out I touched the person, were they alive or dead at the time that I touched them? So we'll say, this is an incredible case. The Meir says you're tar, the Chachamim metamim. The Chacham says you're tameh. Why? Shekol hatmeos kishas mitzi asan. Ultimately, again, I will say why. Because we assume that halacha l'maisa, when judging tuma, we judge it based on when you find it. So Rabbi Meir says that halacha l'maisa, essentially, again, I have a cheskas tara, the person has a cheskas chai, and therefore, again, we assume that when did the person die? The person died now. Chachamim say no, halacha l'maisa, we assume that I'm tameh, that when I touch the person, he was already dead. Why? Because when judging tuma, we look based on what we see right now. V'tani Allah, and we said about that, kishas mitziyasan or b'makom mitziyasan. And both saying we said about that tuma is gauged by when you find it, by what it is when you find it, and by where you find it. Look at Rashi for just a moment. B'makom mitziyasan imatzo shachris meis ba'osam makom shenaga bo balayla tamei avamatzo b'makom acher meis tar v'lar minan kihechi dahacha meis hasam nami hava meis in kamarishan. So both said, listen to this. So tuma is gauged based on when you found it and where you found it. In other words, we do not assume that tuma travels. Shabbos say if halacha l'maisa, I touched the person in location A at night, and in the morning he's found in location B dead. We do not assume that when I touched him at night in location A, already dead and somehow the body was moved afterwards. Rather, again, tuma is gauged based on when you find it and where you find it. So what do you see from here? That tuma is not geographically transferable. That the halachas of tuma say, which I both say, what's the logic in this? The logic in this is the only thing you could honestly know concretely is what? What's here and what's now. Anything else is purely speculation. So we assume that the status of Tumah is gauged based on what it is now and where it is now, which tells us Tumah does not move. Well, this poses a problem according to Rabbi Yochanan, because what did Rabbi Yochanan say? If I had a kupa with taras in corner A, I then move the kupa, and in the course of moving the kupa, I also go and remove the taras. The kupa is now in corner B. What do I find in the kupa in corner B? A sheretz. Rabbi Yochanan said, we assume that the sheretz is also in corner A, which means that the taras are tameh. To which the Gemara says, but we don't say that, right? We don't. Lo mechaskim tumei makom lamakom. We don't assume tumah moves. Where you find it, that's where it is. V'tani Allah, Kishasvi says makom mitziasan v'chi tema. So maybe he'll say hani mili lisrof aval litlos talinan. Maybe what Rabbi Yochanan says is like this: that he holds that tumah is transferable is only ultimately for what? Ultimately, again, for Tolin. Remember again, in other words, we'll say Tumah is not transferable in that we won't destroy Taras based on moving Tumah. But maybe ultimately we'll what? We'll say there's a concept of Tolin. What does Tolin mean? Essentially, it's suspended, meaning it's Asr Midrabanan. So maybe what you'll see in a case of where there was a change of location, the ultimately the Taras will be Asr Midrabanan, or Mi Talinan, as that Shabbos, listen to this case. V'hatana, we learned, Mechat shenimtzas meleach chaluda o shavura. We'll say if you find a needle that was fully rusted or was broken. So we'll say, so the case over here, just the background to this case is as follows. I have a needle that contracted tumah. Now we'll say, now remember, a kli could only go ahead and be makabel tumah and transfer tumah when it's a kli. Once it loses its status of a kli, it can no longer transfer tumah. So we'll say, so for example, a needle, which is a kli, which is a utensil, ultimately, again, if it becomes rusted or breaks, bless you, no longer has the status of tumah. It no longer has the status of a kli, therefore can't transfer tumah. So watch this case. So I have a case of a needle that I know was tameh, but then I found it rusted through or broken. Tahora, it's tar. Shekolat tmeos kishas mitziyasan. Ultimately, I will say because tumah is gauged based on what? Based on when you find it. V'amai leima hay meikara machat mal yasihi v'hashtuhu dehela chaluda. But I understand. Why don't you say? And I will say the case over is, let's say, where I know that needle came in contact with taras at some earlier point. Nevertheless, what we're going to say is that Allah if the needle is rusted through now, which is the case. Let's say you found a burnt sheretz on top of olives. Now I will say a burnt sheretz does not convey tumah. Does not convey tumah. So Rabbi says, now here's what I know. I found the burnt sheretz on top of olives. But what don't I know? What don't I know? Was that sheretz placed on the olives in an incinerated state, in which case the olives are tahor? Or maybe what? Maybe the sheretz was on top of the olives when it was an intact sheretz and became incinerated afterwards. And therefore, again, the olives are what? The olives are tamei. The chin matlis hamuhumam. So we'll say matlis. If you look at Rashi says muhumam. Rashi says habeluya matzabeluya al gabi. So we'll say, so this would be ultimately, again, remember, a matlis, a piece of cloth, has the ability to convey tumah if it conforms to a certain shear. The case over here is I have a matlis, I have a piece of cloth that no longer has the requisite shear. It no longer has the requisite size. So what's my shaila? So I will say, so when it was sitting on the olives at first, did it have the requisite shear and then subsequently become diminished? Or did it never have the requisite shear? So we'll say here these shailas, these are really fascinating. What you have over here is a situation where I have a dover, I have an item that in its current state doesn't convey tumah. But my question is, was it always like this? Or at some point in time, was it in a state which can convey tumah? Something subsequently happened in which it can no longer convey tumah, but the item upon which it is situated is now tameh, because the item in its original state did convey tumah. So we'll say, you hear the shaila. Again, it's easier to illustrate in terms of sheretz. I have sheretz sitting on top of olives. So and now, but what does the sheretz look like now? What does it look like now? It's in toast, right? Well said, toast, right? So we'll say a toasted sheretz does not convey tumah. So my shaila is, was the sheretz from its inception like that, therefore the olives are tahar? Or do we say, no, once upon a time this was a fresh sheretz, and a fresh sheretz does convey tumah, it subsequently became toasted afterwards and doesn't convey tumah. That's the shaila. Jewish Gemara says, tar, all of these cases are tar. Why? Shekalat tmeos kishas mitzyasan. They both say when it comes to tumah, When it comes to Tumah, we go Kishas Mitzvah. Rabbi say, again, when it comes to Tumah, the only thing I can gauge is what? What's in front of me right now? What's in front of me right now? Because the truth is, we'll say anything else is pure speculation. Maybe you'll say that we gauge tumah like when it's found, whether that yields a kula or a chumrah, or b'makom mitziyasan. But we only gauge tumah based on where it's found. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. U'b'makom mitziyasan. Aval shlol makom mitziyasan. Misraf lo sarfinan mitla talinon. Maybe you'll say that ultimately, again, Tumah in its non-point of origin, Shlomakom and Siyasan, we won't burn Taras based on that, but we'll be told and we'll say it's Asr Midrabanon. That's not true. Vatnan, Kikar Agabi Adar. Another interesting case. Let's say you have a kikar, you have a loaf of bread on top of a daf. Rabbi say a daf is a board. Umadaf Tameh Munach Tachtav. Suppose this is an interesting case. You have a cloth underneath the board, and the cloth itself has a lighter form of tumah. Tumas madaf, we're going to see, means madaf means a lighter form of tumah. Right? It has a lighter form of tumah. Supposed to say, here's the case. Right? So we'll say, so the situation over here, halacha l'maisa is what? So I have now, okay, just so you can imagine the case. I have a loaf of bread. The loaf of bread sits on top of a board. What's the status of the board? Perfectly good. Underneath the board is a cloth. The cloth has a lighter form of tumah. We'll discuss what type of tumah. Has a lighter form of tumah. And here's what happens. The bread, I come back, I leave the room, everything is fine. I come back to the room and what happens? The loaf of bread is on the floor. Now, the way the situation is set up is, if the loaf of bread falls off the board, it is impossible that it didn't touch what? The cloth. Which means that the loaf would become tameh. Now, I did not see the loaf fall. All I know is that when I left the room, the loaf was on the board. When I came back to the room, the loaf was on the floor. And I can't tumble off without touching the cloth, which is tameh. So what's my shaila? Right? My shaila is ultimately, again, right, what's the status of the bread? We'll say there's another big mussar, which is don't leave the daf. You see what happens, right? The bread is sitting on the daf. The moment you start paying attention to the daf is the moment that bad things happen. Don't leave the daf. Otherwise, again, the bread starts tumbling everywhere. So as I see, the Gemara goes on, what's that halacha? Torah. So what's that halacha? This is incredible. The loaf is tar. Why is the loaf tar? Listen to this. Sha'ani Omer. Adam tar nichnas l'sham v'natla. Right? So we'll say, because what could have happened? Someone else came in, took the loaf of bread, and put it on the floor. Right? You'll say, come on, why would somebody do that? We'll say, people touch stuff that's not theirs all of the time. Right? Don't ask a shayla on erratic human behavior. Right? People do this all the time. So I assume, in other words, what the Gemara is saying is, the same way that it's possible that the loaf rolled off the board and onto the floor, it's also equally as possible that what? Someone came in and for whatever reason took the loaf off and put it on the ground. Ad sheyomar bari lishlo nichnas adam sham. But unless of course a person says, look, I've been standing here the whole time, no one came in here. So I'll say if you say that, then the only other possibility is that what? That the bread tumbled off. If the bread tumbled off, then it definitely touched what? The cloth, in which case it's tummy. So I'll say this is fascinating. So halacha l'maisa, it's not tameh if there's a possibility that someone came in and moved it. If you know for sure that no one came in, then einachinami, the bread will be tameh. Rabbi Elazar says, lo nitzrucha elo lemakom madron. So Rabbi Elazar says, by the way, this case is only in a situation where the board itself is at a slant. Look at the last Rashi. Elo makom madron, shaf api shadaf shakikar le makom madron, uriya kikar lipal, bim nafla naga bebeged, afilu achitar shani omer, almalo mechaskin until makom lemakom. Supposed to listen to this. So to make it even a bigger chiddush, Rabbi Elazar says this is true even where? Even if the board was at a slope. So we'll say you would say if the board is at a slope, then there's even a greater possibility that's what? That it fell by itself. Even there, halacha l'maisa, we still assume that a person came in and actively moved it. Rabbi say, what do you see from here? Lo mechaskinan tuma mimakom lamakom. Rabbi say, bottom line, what comes out is we don't assume that tuma moves, right? We assume that Tumah is stationary, that where you find the Tumah, that's the same point of origin. We do not assume that Tumah came from one point to another. Amud Beis, Shani Omer, Adam tar nichnas l'sham v'natla. We'll say again because I assume a tar person came in and ultimately moved it. To which the Gemara says, Hachanami nema oriv asa v'shada. So why don't you say over here? We'll say why don't you say that halacha l'maisa? Going back to the case of the kupa. Maybe in the case of the kupa, where ultimately again I went ahead and I moved the kupa from one corner to another. Maybe a raven came along, halacha l'maisa, and dropped the sheretz into the kupa in the new location. To which the Gemara says, Adam de bekavana amrinan. Rabbi say when it comes to a person who acts with kavana, ultimately again I can say that a person came in and moved the loaf. Oriv de shelo bekavana lo amrinan. We'll say a bird that doesn't act with kavana, ultimately again we're not going to say. So michti, let's analyze this. Hi kikar safek tom b'rshus hayachidu. We'll say going back to the case of the kikar. So in the case of the loaf, so we'll say remember again. So same case, I have a loaf sitting on a board. Underneath the board is a cloth that is tameh. I leave the room, the loaf is on the board. I come back to the room, where is the loaf? On the floor. Two possibilities. Possibility A is that the loaf tumbled off. If the loaf tumbled off, then what? It's tameh, because we assume ultimately, we know that it must have touched the cloth. Possibility B is that what? Someone came in, lifted the loaf off the board, placed it on the ground without contact with the cloth. So the Gemara essentially says that halacha l'maisa, we assume that someone came in and moved the loaf. Unless, of course, you know for sure that no one came in, we assume that someone came in ultimately moving the loaf. To which the Gemara says, but one second, the case of the loaf is an easy case. Both say that is a safek tuma b'rshus hayachid, right? This is a safek tuma in a private domain. And what's the halacha? V'chal safek tuma b'rshus hayachid sveika tameh. Both say ultimately again, any case of safek tuma b'rshus hayachid, ultimately again is going to be is safek tameh. Both say that's tuma 101. Tuma 101 is safek tuma b'rshus harabim is tahor. Safek tuma b'rshus hayachid is Tameh. Where do we learn that out from? Let's learn that from Sota. So we know that already. So what's the shine in this case? Mishum dahavi davar she'en das lishal. Because the both say the loaf is something, literally again, that does not have das. You can't ask the loaf, did you touch the cloth or not? The chol davar she'en das lishal ben b'rshus harabim ben b'rshus hayachid sfegotar. Both say another fascinating halach in Hilchos Tumah. Both say when do we say safek tuma b'rshus hayachid tameh, safek tuma b'rshus harabim tar? That's with something sheyesh bo das lishoel. That is with an item ultimately again, which has the ability to answer, which has das. Something that does not have das, ultimately again is tahar regardless. V'bayisema. Another possibility is hachabah tumah d'rabanan. Both say, remember again, the case of the loaf is a case of tumah d'rabanan. Dekanami diktani madof kedichsev Allah niddah. So both say tumas madof is not actually any specific type of tumah, but rather it refers ultimately again to rabbinic tumah. Quotes the pasuk over here from Vayikra from the Tochacha, right? That the Tochacha says that you will get scared Allah nidaf from the rustling of the leaves. So just like it takes a very little wind to rustle the leaves, Tumas Madaf refers to Tumah D'Rabbanan. So we'll say, so in the case of Tumah D'Rabbanan, that's when we will assume ultimately again that someone came in and moved the loaf. But halacha might be different in the realm of Tumah D'Oraisa. So we'll say, what comes out of here is something very important. So this sugya ends here. So we'll say, so what comes out of here? So first of all, from the last two dafim, we learned the four different svaras in Beish. Sorry. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Amen. So we'll say, so first of all, we saw the four different svaras in Shammai. That's what we saw over Friday and Shabbos' daf. Four different svaras in Shammai. And then I will say, well, we also saw over here some very important halachas when it comes to Tumah. Number one, Safek Tumah B'rshus Hayochid will be Tameh. Safek Tumah B'rshus Harabim will be Tahar. But that's only with what? With something sheyesh bo das lisha, which essentially means people. But when it comes to inanimate objects that do not have das, so safek tuma bein b'rshus hayachid, bein b'rshus harabim, ultimately again will be tahar. We also learn out something very important when it comes to tuma. That ultimately again, tuma is assessed how? Based on where it's found and ultimately again in the state in which it is found. So we do not assume that Tumah travels, and also again we do not start speculating, because I will say this goes back to the case of where you touch someone at night and they're dead in the morning. Ultimately again we assess Tumah based on how it's found and where it's found. Very important halachas in terms of Hilchos Tumah. Good. Weiter. So once again, remember, going back to the Mishnah, we had a 3 machlokes. Right? Remember again, what was our case? A woman finds blood. She's been handling taras beforehand. So the shaila is, what's her status? So really up until now, we've been focusing on Shammai. Shammai holds, what's her status? Dayan Shaitan. Dayan Shaitan means we only assume her status changes right now at the time she finds the blood. 4 different svaras as to why that is Dayan Shaitan. Hillel said, Abosai, very, very chumradik shita. Hillel said, mi pekida le pekida. Essentially, we retroactively apply her niddah status all the way until when? Till when? Her last bedika. So however long her last bedika was, we back up her niddah status up until her last bedika. The Chachamim said, lo k'divrei zeh. Not like Shammai, not like Hillel. Rather, what did the Chachamim say? We agree that we back up her status, but to the lesser of the two, to either the last 24 hours or to her last bedika, whichever time frame ultimately again is less. So let's analyze. Here we go. Tan Rabban and the Chacham say lo k'divrei zeh v'lo k'divrei zeh. Here we go. Lo k'divrei Shammai shelo asi siag l'dvar. So we'll say Chacham say we don't like Shammai. Why don't we like Shammai? Because he did not go ahead and make a siag. Right? He did not make a protective fence around the dwelling. In other words, Dayan Shaitan does not allow for any margin of error. We don't like that. We always like to make protective fences around halacha. But look at Divrei Hillel, shehifiz amidos. And I will say not like Hillel. Why? Because Hillel is too machmir. I said again, I want to point out how dramatic this is. Normally you see the reverse, right? Remember, here you have a case where Hillel is being exceptionally machmir, Shammai is being exceptionally mekil. The Chachamim say we don't like exceptional kulas and we don't like exceptional chumras. Rather, Ella me'es la'es me'ates al yam me'pekida le'pekida or me'pekida le'pekida me'ates al yam me'es la'es. Rather, Chachamim say that essentially we go with the lesser of the two, either to the last bedika or to the last 24 hours. So let's analyze the two lashonos. Me'es la'es me'ates al yam me'pekida le'pekida. So what that literally means is me'es la'es means 24 hours. 24 hours will lessen the amount. Literally, it means if it's less than the amount of the last bedika. What does that mean? Ketzad. Gemara illustrates this. Ketzad. Bad ka'atzam be'echad b'Shabbos. Let's say she did a bedika on Sunday. Umatzasa tahora. And then she finds that she is tahora. V'yashva sheni yushlishi v'la badka. And Abosai, she Monday and Tuesday goes on, and she doesn't do a bedika on either of those days. Ula revi'i badko matzah tameya. And on Wednesday she does a bedika and she finds blood. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Ein omrim tetamim b'pekida le'pekida ela me'es leis. We don't say back up her niddah status till when? The Sunday. Rather, what we do is we back up her niddah status for the last 24 hours prior to the last bedika. Good. Next case. We'll say, what's the case here? Ketzad bad ka'atza b'sharishona. If she did a bedika in the first hour of the day, umatzasa tahora, and then ultimately again she finds that she is tar. She doesn't do a bedika second hour, doesn't do a bedika the third hour. And then she does a bedika in the fourth hour. Umatza tameya, and it turns out that she is tameya. Ein omrim tetama me'es leis. We don't back up her tumah for 24 hours. Ella mi pekida lepekida. Rather, we back up her niddah status ultimately to when? To the last bedika. So we'll say this is the shita of the Chachamim. Whatever is the lesser of the two, either to the last bedika or ultimately again 24 hours. Which Gemara says shita. That's obvious. Of course, you're not going to back up her niddah status for 24 hours. Let's say if she did a bedika in the first hour of the day and the bedika was fine, and then she does a bedika in the fourth hour of the day and it's not fine. Of course, you're not going to back up her niddah status 24 hours. She did a bedika 3 hours ago. To which Gemara says you're right. Pshita came in the bad katzah b'sharishana matzah Torah lo me'matin le me'es leis. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Aidi detana me'es leis me'ates ayam b'kida leb'kida. Tananaim b'kida leb'kida me'es ayam me'es leis. So both said, to which the Gemara says, you're right. The Gemara is just employing textual symmetry. That since we said ultimately again, that since ultimately again the 24-hour period can be diminished ultimately again to the last bidiga. Therefore, we said mepekida lepekida metas demeisle. Shabbos say inachinami. Shabbos say, but this is the shita of the chachamim. Shabbos say, so let's be clear. The chachamim have a little bit of a hybrid shita. They agree with Shammai that when a woman finds dam now, they agree with Hillel. They agree with Hillel that when a woman finds dam now, we have to make a protective fence to assume that maybe the blood was present at some time earlier. They disagree, however, with Hillel that you have to go so far back. So they cap the retroactivity window to the lesser of the last bedika or 24 hours, whichever is the lesser amount of time. That is the amount that we will retroactively back up her status. So we'll say a few more lines, then we'll stop. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, "My tamei d'Rabbanan." What's the logic of the Rabbanan? Isha margeshes biatzma. Ultimately, again, because the Rabbanan holds a woman knows when she bleeds. Isha margeshes biatzma. Rabba say, remember again, that was one of the svaras of Shammai. One second, that's one of Shammai's svaras. So we'll say one of the four svaras for why Shammai holds dayashaita is what? A woman has a hargasha. A woman knows when she bleeds. But remember, that's not a svaras for retroactivity. That's a svaras for dayashaita. To which the Gemara says, you're right. The Rabba lichadude la'abayehu. What do I will say? Rabba only said this in order to sharpen Abaye. So remember again, essentially, Rabba's making sure that Abaye was paying attention. Right? So therefore he throws out the svara that was not a good svara in order that Abaye should say, hey, that doesn't make any sense. So we'll say, what is the reason for the Rabbanan? This is actually quite fascinating. Ki hadam Rabbi Shmuel, Chachamim tiknu lahen lebenos Yisrael, Shiyu Botkos Atzman Shachris Va'arvis. So we'll say, this is incredible. Now remember again, I will say, when we hear Niddah, we think, I probably shouldn't do word association here. Right? We'll say, right, we're good. But sorry. When we do Niddah, we think Niddah, ultimately, again, I will say, so we think Taras HaMishpacha. Right? We think of Hilchos Niddah vis-a-vis their implications for intimacy. But the truth is, remember again, the topic over here, Bose, has nothing, there's no, whatever's happening over there, cut it out. Right? But remember again, the topic of the Mishnah over here is Taras. Right? To both say this is all about Taras. Remember again, we'll get into Hilchos Niddah vis-a-vis the marital relationship. That we'll spend a lot of time on that. That's not our topic. Right? Over here we're talking about Taras. So we'll say, now listen to this. So this is incredible. So listen to this. So what's the reason that I want to watch this? So Rabbi Shmuel, Chachamim tiknu lebenos Yisrael. I will say the Chachamim are talking as follows: that if a woman is dealing with Taras, she both goes atzman shachris va'arvis. I will say if you are a woman who is dealing with Taras, so Chazal mandated you need to do a bedika in the morning and in the evening. This is a din in Taras. Shachris lahachshir Taras shalayla. You do a bedika in the morning. In order to this is actually very interesting. The bedika in the morning does what? Make sure that all the taras you did the previous night are okay. Va'arvis lahachshir taras shal yom. You do a bedika at night to ensure that the taras you did by day ultimately again are good. So I'll say this is fascinating. So this is rabbinic legislation. If a woman is dealing with taras, we need to make sure that she's ritually pure. So Chazal legislated 2 daily bedikas. A morning bedika to ensure that any taras you dealt with at night are okay, and a nighttime bedika to ensure that all the taras you did that day are going to be okay as well. And I will say what this also does is it also limits problematic taras, because what's the worst case scenario? If a woman goes in and does a bedika at night and she finds that it's not good, she finds blood, then at least what it does is it caps the fallout. The fallout is limited to what? To the taras that she did that day. So like this, again, you have a taras insurance policy. It's limited liability, right? Or it's limited damages ultimately for taras. So we'll say, Vizu, badka. Now we'll say, so therefore, what's our case over here? Our case over here, we're assuming, is a woman who didn't do a bedika. Therefore, hifsida ona. Therefore, she loses out on that period. But my ona, what does it mean to ona? Ona yisera. So let's remember again, what the Rabbanan are essentially doing is like this. The case over here, according to the Rabbanan, is a woman who has not been maintaining a regular schedule of bedikos when handling taras. So if you don't maintain a regular schedule of bedikos when handling taras, then ultimately, again, there's greater liability. What's the greater liability? You run the risk of losing. Now remember again, if you're maintaining a regular schedule of taras, of bedikos, while handling taras, the most damages that could happen is what? What we call one ona. We're saying ona in halacha. No, if you're maintaining a regular schedule of bedikos. Regular schedule of bedikos means you're doing a bedika when? Once in the morning, once in the evening. Which means every ona, every 12 hours, you're doing a bedika. An ona means a period of 12 hours. So in the normal circumstances, if you're maintaining a regular schedule of bedikos, then halacha lamaisa, the most taras you can mess up, so to speak, is one ona's worth of taras. If you don't comply with a regular schedule of bedikos, then what? The Chazal said the most you can mess up is what? 24 hours. 24 hours. And I will say, which is essentially an additional oni yisera. Amar Papa l'Rava v'hazimnin mishkachas l'gimel onos. But I will say sometimes, ultimately, again, depending on when she does the bedika, right? And ultimately, let's say again, and then there's, let's say, a 24 hours beforehand, that could end up encompassing, I will say, actually 3 onos. Remember, an ona is a 12-hour period, a daytime period, a nighttime period. Sometimes, depending, ultimately, again, we're going to see these cases, when she does her bedika, if we back up her status 24 hours, it could actually include 3 onos, to which the Gemara says, Vazina mishkachas lu gimel onos b'me'es leis. Hishu chachamim midosem shel tachlos b'me'es leis. So we'll say then that's unfortunately going to be her problem, because halacha lamaisa Chazal have to create uniform shiurim. So if we're going to back up her status 24 hours, remember again, we'll say 24 hours is the maximum. It's either the lesser of 24 hours or the last bedika. So pretty much the maximum amount of time is going to be 24 hours. And sometimes it can happen, I will say, that 24 hours could span 3 different onos. That could happen, which would mean that taras that she did over 3 different onos ultimately again would become tameh. To which the Gemara says, yes, that could happen because Chazal wanted to make their shiurim uniform. The other possibility is shelo yechote niskar. I will say ultimately again, the other possibility is that ultimately again, Chazal wanted to make sure that if someone skirts the law, ultimately again, they would not go ahead and benefit from not doing the bedikos. Ma'aben Arba say what ultimately again is the nafkamina between these two approaches. Iko beinahu the isnisa v'lo batka. Both the nafkamina ultimately would be with what? Where a woman experienced an onus and therefore again did not end up doing the bedika. If a woman did right, so we'll say if a woman had an ones, so an ones again, that would not be a situation of shlo yechote niskar, but ultimately again, that would be shlo yechot. So if you hold this as a din shlo yechot niskar, then that wouldn't apply to onus. If you hold that in general, it's an idea that Chazal wanted women to go ahead and be careful with their bedikos. See, even if for some reason she had extenuating circumstances, the halacha would still apply. So we'll say, so this is the shita of the Chachamim. The Chachamim hold that halacha lemaisa, a hybrid shita. They don't hold like Shammai because they hold that Shammai does not create a siyag. Shammai doesn't create a siyag. They don't hold like Hillel because they feel that Hillel is what? Hillel's too machmir, too extreme, right? Because remember again, in Hillel's model, technically speaking, you could back up her status for what? For what? For days. For days. Rather, again, they hold the lesser of the two. We retroactively back up her status, but to the lesser of either what? Either to the last bedika or the last 24 hours. Rabbi say, what is the svara of the chacham? This is incredibly important. The svara of the chachamim is this is a din in taras. Chazal legislated that if you are a woman that is ultimately going ahead and dealing with taras, then what's the halacha? What's the halacha? You have to do a bedika when? Every morning and every evening. The morning bedika covers what? Covers what? The bedikos of the night before, the taros of the night before. The evening bedika covers what? The taros of that day. If you fail to comply with a proper bedika schedule, ultimately again you are penalized. That's the Rabban, so you're penalized. What are you penalized for? The lesser of either the retroactivity clause to the last bedika or the last 24 hours. We'll stop over here. Let's do the siyum on Meseches Niddah.